Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 239 based on novel. So let's start. Cai Yunxiang immediately rejected, no way. This money is all earned by our brothers and sisters of the sacred cult. Why should we give it to the emperor without reason? Qin Mu said patiently, there's a method to carry out commerce. Founding Heavenly Saint cult isn't for the sake of earning money, it's for the everyday use of the common people, to let the people live better lives. The sacred cult carrying out commercial activities is to make the lives of the people more convenient, and it's not to hoard money. What you are earning is great abundance coins. So if Eternal Peace Empire no longer existed, the great abundance coins will have no use anymore. Now that the sacred cult has amassed half of the fortune in the world, disaster wouldn't be far. Cai Yunxiang was still reluctant. We clearly earned the money through hard work. Money can cause wealth, and it can also cause disaster. As long as it benefits the people, it's okay. If it doesn't benefit the people, it's not okay. Heavenly Saint cult isn't so powerful that we can rise above the heads of the people, to rise above the power of the empire. We aren't so powerful that we are invincible. When it was founded, Heavenly Saint cult's original intention was the path of the saint, not to covet the fortune of the whole world. Cai Yunxiang was still slightly unwilling when an old woman walked towards their primordial spirits. She raised her head to look at them. Xiong'er, the sacred cult master is right. We take from the people, so we have to give back to them. Our Cai family may be managing the wealth of the sacred cult, but how the wealth of the sacred cult should be used is still the decision of the cult master. You have put too much importance on money, and have forgotten the heart of Heavenly Saint cult. Qin Mu greeted the old woman at once. Cai family's great-grandma. The old woman was flustered, but she returned his greeting and grinned. Sacred cult master, Xiong'er may be a little greedy, but she isn't a miser. Qin Mu gave his thanks and said, so, this is Cai family. I have intruded and alarmed great-grandma, please pardon me. I am still in the Imperial garden, so I need to return as soon as possible. After saying that, he bowed and his primordial spirit vanished. Cai Yunxiang also quickly pulled back her primordial spirit and returned into her body. Why does great-grandma want to give the wealth of the sacred cult to the emperor? The great-grandma of Cai family said with a smile, cult master is right. The people are rich, the empire is weak, and only a selected few are strong. When outsiders invade and the empire is wiped out, the wealth of the people will cease to exist. No matter how much wealth one has, they would all turn into flowing water. The best route is still having rich people in a strong empire. As long as the empire doesn't fall, the wealth of the people can last long. In the Imperial garden, Qin Mu's primordial spirit returned into his body. He saw Ling Yuxiu bending down in front of him, smelling the flower as well. There was only a flower between their faces. Ling Yuxiu opened her eyes secretly, and blushed when she saw Qin Mu staring at her. Qin Mu suddenly let go of the branch, and gave her a gentle kiss on her lips. Ling Yuxiu cried out in surprise and turned around to run. She parted the flowers, and her voice came from afar. You hooligan, if my father knows about this, he will definitely take your head off. Qin Mu laughed loudly and chased after her. Behind a willow tree from a distance, Emperor Yang Feng had a dark face as he said to the little eunuch behind him, bring my little booklet over. The little eunuch hurriedly offered up the little booklet, brush and ink. Emperor Yang Feng flipped open his little booklet and raised his brush. Molesting my precious daughter, off with your head. I shall write it down first. Your Majesty, it's not good for us to be peeking from here, is it? The little eunuch asked cautiously. Emperor Yang Feng stared at him. Off with your head too. But not now, I'll write it down first. The little eunuch pouted his lips. Your Majesty, my head has already been taken off over a dozen times. Qin Mu chased after Ling Yuxiu. The young man and young woman played for a moment, and felt contented. Just as their feelings were growing stronger, and they were about to do something, first ancestor human emperor came over. Ling Yuxiu hurriedly retreated when she saw him coming. She isn't a bad girl, first ancestor human emperor said. Qin Mu jumped in shock. You've seen everything. So has the emperor. He's over there. First ancestor human emperor pointed at the trees far away and said, he has been following you two for quite a long time. The empress is over there, hiding behind the fake mountain. I saw them just now, but they didn't notice me. Qin Mu broke out in a cold sweat as he looked at the trees. He saw the emperor lifting his dragon robe and leaving quickly with a little eunuch. On the other side, the empress and several palace maids were also moving away from the fake mountain in a hurry. First ancestor human emperor looked at Qin Mu's distressed state, and he said with a smile, you and I are both the same, throwing all of the responsibilities to others and not getting ourselves involved. Now that the negotiations with Kaishi have been handed over to the emperor, we should be talking about proper business now. Do you want to learn my heaven and earth mudra? You have seen how strong it is, however, I could not find a successor. Only you can inherit my mudra skills. First ancestor, it's not that I don't want to learn, it's just that my frame of mind is different from yours. Qin Mu said righteously, I don't have your experience, and I won't be able to learn your mudra skills. First ancestor was speechless. He seemed to have suffered from a major setback, making him dispirited and listless. He had a dim and depressed expression, and seemed to have aged considerably. Qin Mu couldn't bear to see him like this. He said, why don't you teach it to me first? I'll learn it if I can. If I can't, I'll seek a worthy successor for you. First ancestor's sorrow turned into delight, and he said with a smile, since you have the overlord body, you will definitely be able to learn it. My technique is called Sacred Secrets of Heaven and Earth Heart. You will be the heart of heaven and earth, standing between them as they crumble. You will borrow the power of the falling heaven and rending earth, transforming into my heaven and earth mudra skills. He imparted his technique and mudra flawlessly to Qin Mu, and Qin Mu learned diligently. He memorized and comprehended first ancestor human emperor's technique and mudra skills with unmatched precision. It was not inferior to sacred scripture, and furthermore, there were even all kinds of knowledge and understanding of founding emperor era. However, this kind of technique brought along an intense imprint of that era. Qin Mu comprehended it, but he could never get the hang of it. First ancestor human emperor was full of anticipation, as he waited for Qin Mu to execute his mudra skills. However, after Qin Mu learned them, he continued to study the runes that were on the divine ring of creation. He tried to assemble the runes together to execute a creation divine art. Qin Mu decided to try it and threw out a mudra. A little palace maid that was just passing by yelped in surprise as she transformed into a little lamb. Qin Mu cried out in delight, it's done. It's done. First ancestor human emperor was depressed. Qin Mu caught the little lamb, and reversed the mudra skill to transform it back into the palace maid, who promptly left them in a flustered manner. Qin Mu took a glance at his expression, and he said with a smile, First ancestor, I have already said that our frame of minds are different. I don't have that kind of mental state like yours, so I can't execute your mudra skills. First ancestor human emperor shook his head, and turned to leave with a bleak expression. How do you know if you never tried it before? I thought you and I are the same, orphans of Qin family, abandoned on this world. Boom. An explosion from a violent tremor suddenly came from behind him. First ancestor turned around, and saw Qin Mu standing alone between heaven and earth, his body ready to fight against the looming disaster. First Ancestor was stunned, and he revealed a look of anticipation. There's nothing an overlord body cannot learn. With one hand as heaven and another hand as earth, Qin Mu had a dim and depressed expression. Qin Mu could execute heaven and earth mudra not because of the overlord body, but because of one sentence that First Ancestor had said, and that sentence was, "You and I are the same, orphans of Qin family." Hearing these words made him feel the same, and his frame of mind resonated with First Ancestor. He could experience the destruction of founding emperor era, and as the only orphan of Qin family in this world, he could feel the helplessness, as he carried up this heaven and earth by himself. This kind of feeling was how First Ancestor felt, and that was also how he felt. Not only that, First Ancestor wanted to carry founding emperor era, and not let the era be wiped out. What Qin Mu wanted to carry was the world today, the era of eternal peace. Eternal peace may look safe now, and the people might be living happily, but Qin Mu knew very well that danger was creeping in step by step. The devil race of Supreme Emperor Heaven, the stone statues in the territory of eternal peace, the fake sky, and high heavens that was above West Earth. Even the remaining survivors of Crimson Light were also a threat. Eternal Peace era just had to expose the slightest clue, and they could be wiped out at any moment. Eternal Peace, this new era that was just born, was already shaking in the wind and rain. Everything could flip around and be destroyed. It was this kind of mental state that had allowed him to unleash the power of First Ancestor's heaven and earth mudra. Under the power of the mudra skill, Qin Mu was not only a stabilizing force, but he was also more of a stable pillar that could hold up heaven and earth. What he wanted to do was to put an end to that invisible disaster, not allowing history to repeat itself. Even though he had this dim and depressed mental state, he didn't have the dispirited emotion that was on First Ancestor Human Emperor. They were both heaven and earth mudra, but in his mudra, there was a spirit that was rousing vigorously and becoming stronger in the face of disaster. This was what was different from First Ancestor Human Emperor. This was also the reason why First Ancestor Human Emperor couldn't help becoming stunned when turned around and saw Qin Mu's mudra. Qin Mu executed one move after another move of his heaven and earth mudra. First Ancestor Human Emperor's mudra skill was different from all of the other mudra that Qin Mu had seen. His mudra skill needed two hands to make a mudra, and any move required the use of both hands, one mudra as the heaven, while the other one as the earth. The heaven mudra had the palm markings of clouds in the sky, and its fingerprints were the sun and moon, or the five-element star. On the other hand, the earth mudra had the palm markings of rivers and mountains, and its fingerprints were the lakes and the seas. When the heaven mudra vibrated, the clouds transformed. The five-element star, sun, and moon operated, and the five fingers burst forth with the power of the five elements, or the sun and moon. As for the earth mudra, the rivers surged forth while the mountains rose. Every fingerprint was like an ocean that had boundless power. Finally, when the heaven fell and the earth rended, the power was even more terrifying. Earthquake, flood, hurricane, and volcano eruption were hidden in the earth mudra, while stars were moving to strike the ground in the heaven mudra. As a result, the mudra skills transformed into mudras of destruction, and their power was raised several times. However, that was the divine arts of three forms of overturning heaven. It couldn't be used easily. After some time, Qin Mu withdrew his power, and the apparitions of the heaven falling and earth rending around him vanished. You have learned it, and you have already used it well. First Ancestor Human Emperor revealed a gratified smile and said, "Use what you have learned. I anticipate my mudra to be brought to greater heights by you." Qin Mu even had a temperament that was depressed, yet pushing forward to improve. He was affected by heaven and earth mudra, and couldn't instantly break out of that temperament. He needed some time to get rid of the effect of heaven and earth mudra. This mudra skill is a bit weird. Qin Mu looked around and saw that the Imperial garden was still complete, not a single petal or leaf was missing. The power of the heaven and earth mudra that he had just executed earlier was clearly massive. Even the sky and the ground could have been shattered. He initially thought that Emperor Yanfeng's Imperial garden would be torn apart by his heaven and earth mudra. However, he didn't expect the Imperial garden to be completely untouched. Could it be that the terrifying power he had felt was only a kind of hallucination? The spirit of heaven and earth mudra is to support heaven and earth so that they wouldn't fall. It is to support the lives of the people. So why would it destroy heaven and earth? First ancestor human emperor said, the power of this mudra will only land on the enemy's body. It will not destroy the surroundings. Qin Mu felt slight pity towards him, and he said, First ancestor, your mudra skills aren't fierce enough. I can feel immense power when practicing, but it can't even damage the emperor's vegetable garden. First ancestor human emperor was speechless from anger and pointed at him, at a loss for words. After a long time, he finally said, I fought up 800 floors in crimson light heaven suppressing floor in one go. Haven't you seen the power of my mudra? Qin Mu shook his head honestly, and he said with a guilty conscience, I was focused on studying the runes on the divine ring of creation, and never watched your fight. On the other hand, Pan Gongtso kept staring at the battle, and he said it was nothing for you to defeat Kaishi. Your realm is much higher than him, and it was only natural for you to defeat him. First ancestor human emperor was dispirited as he hung his head down. What I fought wasn't him, it was crimson light heaven suppressing floor. If I wanted to fight him, he would have died in the first move. Why do I feel like I have fought 800 floors for nothing? Qin Mu hurriedly said, First ancestor, there's no need to be disappointed. Even though this mudra skill of yours is inferior to my sword skill, it can still be very powerful if I change it up. I guarantee that I will be able to destroy the emperor's vegetable garden. After I make some improvements to it later, it will definitely be awe-inspiring and overbearing. First ancestor walked out feebly, waving his hands at him. Do whatever you want to it, What he was about to say was overcome with a huge sigh. He felt truly helpless. After walking far away, he still wasn't at ease thinking that Qin Mu would change his mudra skill messily. When he saw Qin Mu still continuing to study the runes of creation, he let out a sigh of relief. However, he was still slightly disappointed. He didn't continue to cultivate my mudra skill. Is my mudra skill that insignificant? After a few days, the Imperial court negotiated with Kaishi, and they signed an oath of alliance. Kaishi had turned down some of the items Qin Mu had listed, but he had agreed on most of them. However, he requested Emperor Yanfeng to establish academies and schools in the territory for the remaining survivors of Crimson Light. These academies and schools would be teaching eternal peace's paths, skills, and divine arts to the remaining survivors of Crimson Light. Emperor Yanfeng agreed. He drew out a huge piece of territory in the southern border that was near to great ruins, allowing the remaining survivors of Crimson Light to settle down there. Kaishi had also agreed to give the divine ring that Qin Mu had instructed to take at all cost. Qin Mu was overjoyed. He immediately headed to South Sea with Kaishi to take the divine ring of creation back to the capital city, afraid that he might go back on his word. Pan Gongtso felt pain in his heart when he saw Kaishi agreeing to more than half of Qin Mu's terms, and giving so many treasures of the underwater god city to Eternal Peace Empire. Teacher, this is an alliance, not a submission. Teacher has given Emperor Yanfeng too much. There are tens of thousands of divine weapons. Not to mention that divine ring of creation, it's even a treasure among treasures. How could you just give it away to Eternal Peace? Kaishi sneered and said, this cult master Qin is just a country bumpkin that has never seen the world before. The emperor has also never seen the world before. The same goes for you. Pan Gong Tso was puzzled. May teacher enlighten me. These divine weapons are all forged by Crimson Light era. How rich was our celestial heavens back then? Merely several 100,000 divine weapons are nothing to us. They are just reserve weapons in one of the treasuries in the celestial palaces. Kaishi continued indifferently. As for the divine ring of creation, this divine ring had indeed taken quite a lot of effort by my Crimson Light God dynasty to forge. It's probably impossible to forge another one without the blueprints, and skilled craftsmen are rare here. This divine ring is merely a key to unseal my people. Now that my people have already been unsealed, there's no use leaving this divine ring behind. On the other hand, we got a huge territory. It's important that Crimson Light God dynasty have a place to stand in our ancestral land. We can then slowly absorb and expand our territory. After learning their paths, skills, and divine arts, how can eternal peace defend against the gods of my Crimson Light God dynasty? Pan Gong Tso's eyes lighted up, and he rubbed his palms while praising him. Kaishi said with a smile, when standing at a different height, what you see will be different. Disciple, the previous height you were standing on is merely equivalent to the top of a chicken coop. You might think that the earthworms in the ground are good, but to the eagles in the sky, the earthworms are just scraps for the chickens. Pan Gong Tso bowed down, and he said sincerely, teacher's teaching is right. What a joke that Qin Mu thought he has gotten his way. Kaishi smiled. That's because his horizons aren't high so he can't see far. However, Emperor Yangfeng is the great ruler of eternal peace era, and never did I expect him to be also short-sighted. I hold him in contempt. This kind of emperor isn't worthy of ruling this land. Follow me to meet Emperor Yangfeng. I need to find him for some matters. The master and disciple went into the palace to seek an audience, and Yang Zhigui came out in a hurry to welcome them. His Majesty is in the Imperial garden, observing Lord Qin, who is testing the treasure. Please follow me. Kaishi followed him to the Imperial garden. From a distance, he could see the huge divine ring of creation hoisted on a fake mountain. Around them were tall walls that blocked and prevented outsiders from entering. When they arrived, there were 3 to 5 gods who seemed to be civil officials. They were standing around the divine ring of creation, with Emperor Yangfeng. First Ancestor was among them as well. On the side, the Empress brought Ling Yuxiu, and other princes and princesses. She had over a dozen palace maids serving her. In the center of the divine ring, Qin Mu took out a huge pile of calculation spirit weapons to form a huge calculation tool. He was constantly calculating something, and no one knew what he was tinkering with. Your Majesty. Kaishi went forward and greeted him. Since we have already formed an alliance, I will have to leave eternal peace to meet the Son of God. Even though I have already signed an oath of alliance with Your Majesty, I will still need to inform the Son of God. Could Your Majesty send envoys to head towards Crimson Light Floating World to meet the Son of God? Yes, sending envoys is necessary. Emperor Yangfeng said with a smile, after Minister Qin finishes testing the divine ring of creation, I will send out a few envoys to follow Dao friend Kaishi towards the floating world. Dao friend Kaishi, please wait a moment. Kaishi understood, and he stood at the side with a smile as he looked quietly at Qin Mu calculating in the ring. Pan Gong Tso smiled as well. He was very pleased as he thought to himself, I've heard Emperor Yangfeng is a muddle-headed and tyrannical fellow, wanting to chop off people's heads at the drop of a hat. If Emperor Yangfeng discovered that the divine ring that he had spent a huge price on is useless, he would definitely chop off the head of this guy. In the divine ring of creation, Qin Mu calculated for some time, and he finally kept his spirit weapons of calculation with a smile. I'm 100% confident now. Kaishi said with a smile, little friend Qin, if you want to execute the divine ring of our Crimson Light era, you can ask me, and I'll teach you. Qin Mu shook his head, as he tried to light up the activation rune on the divine ring. You don't know. There's no use asking you. Kaishi wasn't angry at all. He remained smiling as he said, the activation rune isn't that, little friend Qin. You have miscalculated. It's right. Qin Mu floated in the ring, and the runes on the divine ring of creation lighted up one after another. The runes transformed continuously like flowing water while the huge rings overlapped the small rings. The divine rings spun, and they seemed different from what Kaishi had executed before. These divine rings were actually rotating in the reverse direction. WRRNG, WRNNG, WRNNG. The speed of the divine ring of creation spun faster and faster. Runes shone out in all directions and quickly landed on every single person in this vast courtyard. Suddenly, snapping sounds rang out, and Kaishi hurriedly looked over. He saw the bodies of Emperor Yangfeng and the rest changing rapidly. Emperor Yangfeng, who was formidable and extraordinary, had now grown a fish head. As for the gods beside Emperor Yangfeng, some had their heads turned into a treetop, while some had their heads turned into a jellyfish. Even the Empress was turned into a huge sea beast. Kaishi was startled, and he quickly looked at Pangong Tso. Pangong Tso was already sprawled on the ground, and he had already turned into a huge sea snake that was currently squirming. Kaishi hurriedly touched his head, and he cried out in surprise. His heads had also become 3 fish heads. Not only that, his primordial spirit was changing as well. All the magic powers that he had cultivated diligently for the past hundreds of thousands of years were completely unable to be used. Kaishi was flustered as he looked at his legs that had turned into a fishtail. Among the people present, only First Ancestor wasn't assimilated aside from Qin Mu. However, his corporeal body was also transforming. Fish scales and gills were growing out of his body from time to time. It was evident that First Ancestor Human Emperor couldn't completely defend against the power of this divine ring of creation too. This wasn't a divine art that could cause significant damage to others, but instead, it was a strange power of creation. Because First Ancestor Human Emperor had learned the art of creation before, he was able to defend against it. This is bad. Kaishi suddenly came to a realization. No wonder Qin Mu, this rascal, had to get this divine ring of creation no matter what. When this rascal took a liking to my god execution mysterious knife, I should have known that this rascal is as experienced as an old expert thief. Kaishi's cultivation was profound after all, so he immediately tried to resist being assimilated by the divine ring of creation. However, his consciousness gradually turned blurry, and his vital qi was unable to be used as well. A body with 3 heads and 6 arms was a symbol of having a strong corporeal body for battle during Crimson Light era, but against the power of creation, he was completely helpless. Soon, he transformed into a huge fish with 3 heads and 6 fins, flopping on the ground. At this moment, other than Qin Mu who was in the center of the divine rings, only First Ancestor Human Emperor was unaffected by the power of creation. He still retained his consciousness. Everywhere in the garden, various kinds of sea creatures and sea plants had turned the whole garden upside down. Luckily, before Qin Mu had tested the divine ring of creation, he had already ordered people to construct high walls around them to block the rays of these divine rings. Therefore, the power of creation didn't affect anyone outside. Human Emperor Qin, enough. First Ancestor Human Emperor hurriedly shouted, the power of this treasure is extraordinary. There's no need to test anymore. Be careful of causing irreparable damage to their primordial spirits. In the circular ring, Qin Mu stopped executing the divine ring of creation, and the rings stopped rotating. The scales and gills on First Ancestor gradually disappeared, while the others in the garden were still flopping on the ground. They didn't recover their true form. Qin Mu waited for a moment, but these people still haven't returned to their original form. He pondered and said, "This is a kind of seal. It will seal their corporeal bodies and primordial spirits when it landed on their bodies, and they are unable to undo it by themselves." He took out a brush and paper to write down his ideas. First ancestor human emperor kept hurrying him, "Undo the seal for them quickly. The longer things drag out, both the soul and the primordial spirit will be assimilated." Qin Mu kept his brush and paper, and let the divine ring of creation rotate in the right direction. Runes for unsealing shone in all directions, and they removed all the seals of creations on everyone's bodies. Bang, bang, bang. Sounds of explosion rang out, as everyone's corporeal bodies transformed back to normal. Even Emperor Yangfeng was looking at this treasure in fear. God Kaishi was full of regret, as he felt his heart bleeding. He looked at the divine ring of creation, and wanted to take it back very much. He also realized that this was probably Qin Mu's goal at the start. It wasn't the hundreds of thousands of divine weapons on the list. Qin Mu would definitely not return this divine ring to him, even if he handed over Crimson Light Heaven suppressing floor. The value of this divine ring had already far surpassed Crimson Light Heaven suppressing floor. Old expert thief. Truly an old expert thief. An old and experienced thief possessed an incomparably ruthless set of eyes that were able to differentiate what was a treasure and what was not. Even treasures that one didn't know were in their house could be dug out by him and be bought away at an extremely cheap price, or just stolen straight away. This kind of old thief usually possessed a different type of thought process that ordinary people don't have. With their keen senses, they could detect places that others couldn't see, and an old thief could make a dull treasure shine bright once more. In Kaishi's eyes, Qin Mu was obviously an old and experienced thief. He himself didn't even see the greatest use of the divine ring of creation. He had only treated it as a key to awaken his people. However, Qin Mu have thought the other way, and treated the divine ring as a seal. In reality, Qin Mu was no different from an ordinary youth. He was playful and mischievous, but the great difference was he grew up with an old thief that would never fail to steal. Cripple was used to seeing all kinds of treasures, and his thought process was different from ordinary people. He could usually think of what others couldn't, and since Qin Mu was taught by him ever since he was young, he naturally looked like an old and experienced thief. After testing the treasure, everyone was covered in dirt, so they left at once to change their clothing. Not long after, Emperor Yangfeng returned and asked with a smile, "Is Mr. Kaishi planning to return to the floating world? It's only proper that I send some envoys to accompany you on the trip." "Sir, please wait a moment." Kaishi nodded his head, and his gaze flickered. "Your Majesty, I would like to use Crimson Light Heaven suppressing floor to exchange for the divine ring of creation. May I know if that's possible?" Emperor Yangfeng laughed. "The weather today is perfect. Minister Qin, you have made a mess of my imperial garden. Off with your head." Pan Gongtso revealed a look of anticipation, but Emperor Yangfeng still wore a smile. It was apparent that he had just said that casually, and he was actually feeling great. Pan Gongtso was disappointed. Kaishi took a glance at Qin Mu and said, "I felt little friend Qin is intelligent, so I would like him to follow me to the floating world." Emperor Yanfeng's heart stirred slightly as he looked at Qin Mu. Qin Mu immediately shook his head. "I won't go even if you beat me to death. I will be beaten to death if I go with you." Emperor Yangfeng said with a smile, "I indeed need an envoy that could control the situation after heading to the floating world. If Imperial Preceptor is here, I would ask him to make a trip, but he still has to take charge of the battle in Supreme Emperor Heaven. He can't just leave the battlefield. Other than Imperial Preceptor, the only one who wouldn't lack the character of my eternal peace will be Minister Qin. Even I am inferior to Minister Qin. Qin Mu felt refreshed and said with a smile, "Won't go." Beside him, a little eunuch carried a brush and offered up a small booklet. Emperor Yangfeng raised the brush and dipped it into the ink, adding one more stroke on the little booklet. "You won't go even after I have flattered you. What's your Majesty writing?" Qin Mu walked forward and saw numerous names on the small booklet. They were mostly names of officials, and his name was also among them. His name had 6 to 7 sets of tally marks, and there was one set with 4 strokes. Among the names on this page, he had the most set of tally marks. Emperor Yangfeng hurriedly closed the small booklet. However, Qin Mu's hands were quicker. He stole the small booklet and flipped through it. There were over a dozen pages in this small booklet, and the name with the most set of tally marks wasn't his, it belonged to the Empress. She had dozens of sets of tally marks. Emperor Yangfeng quickly snatched the booklet back, and he snarled, "How dare you steal my stuff? Off with your head." After saying that, he added another stroke on Qin Mu's name. Qin Mu came to a realization. He took a glance at the Empress who was on the side and thought to himself, they must have quarreled frequently. So the Emperor had already chopped off the Empress' head over hundreds of times. I have a hunch that the Empress doesn't know about this. If she does, the chambers of Imperial concubines will be in havoc. Emperor Yangfeng carefully kept the small booklet, and he said to Kaishi, "Minister Qin is my right-hand man. He can't leave the Imperial court easily, so may I ask Mr. Kaishi, how long will you take? If the time you take is too long, I won't bear to let Minister Qin go." Kaishi said with a smile, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. When I had originally brought my clansmen and controlled the planet, we floated in space and didn't know where the ancestral land was. That's why we spent thousands of years to find the ancestral land. If I bring only little friend Qin this time, we can go and return in just a year." Emperor Yangfeng asked curiously, "Why did you have to spend so much time in the past and it's so fast this time?" Kaishi replied, "In the past, there was only a star atlas that marked the ancestral land, so we still needed to calculate the course of the stars. We also needed to avoid the pursuit of our enemies. Because of this, we were delayed for a very long time. Now that I know the way, there's a fast ship in the underwater celestial palaces from my Crimson Light era. Its speed is even faster than a planet. Therefore, the speed is thousands of times faster than before." Emperor Yangfeng put his heart at ease, and he said with a smile, "Mr. Kaishi, please wait for a few days. Minister Qin will be leaving with you." Qin Mu immediately shook his head. "Your Majesty," Emperor Yangfeng said sincerely, "a man should read 1,000,000 books and travel 1,000,000,000 miles. The only one that won't bring disgrace to our empire is Minister Qin. Your mission in Crimson Light floating world is critical. Whether or not we will be able to ally with the remaining survivors of Crimson Light will be up to your abilities. There's no one more suitable than you. I also know that there will be many dangers and it will be difficult, but only you are capable enough." Qin Mu's face revealed a huge frown as he looked at Kaishi. Kaishi smiled and didn't say a word. Behind Kaishi, Pangong so did a slitting action across his neck. After a moment, the two of them took their leave. Emperor Yangfeng saw them walking away and said, "Minister Qin, Kaishi isn't the master of the house. Crimson Light Son of God is the one who can make decisions, and the oath that Kaishi had signed with my eternal peace is not even bullshit. The Son of God needs to nod his head before the oath of alliance is in effect. Eternal peace may look stable now, but it's actually riddled with dangers. That's why we need to confirm this oath of alliance with the floating world no matter what. When you reach the floating world, that Crimson Light Son of God will probably create trouble for the envoys of eternal peace, and I can't find anyone else better than you to handle this kind of situation. These are my sincere words." I can't personally go there, but I will let Princess Xiao go with you. If anything happens, my princess will die together with you. Qin Mu blinked his eyes. I'll go, all right. He looked at First Ancestor Human Emperor. First Ancestor hesitated for a moment before saying, I can go with you. Qin Mu settled his heart down, and he said with a smile, There's nothing to worry about, Your Majesty. You can be at ease. Emperor Yang Feng let out a shaky breath and sighed. I'm still not very reassured even if you guys are going. When you pass by Supreme Emperor Heaven, visit Imperial Preceptor, and ask his opinion. I shall prepare several gifts for you guys to offer to Crimson Light Son of God when you visit him. Qin Mu nodded. 2 days later, Emperor Yang Feng prepared the gifts. They were the 3 basic sword forms that had been compiled into books. Qin Mu was the one who will carry them, while Ling Yuxiu was in charge of the exotic treasures. Qin Mu, First Ancestor Human Emperor, and Ling Yuxiu prepared to leave for their journey. Kaishi and Pangong had already prepared the ship. It was a huge ship that was in the underwater city in South Sea. Kaishi took it out from the seal, and it was an ancient flying ship that had 6 wings. The ship was covered in all kinds of gorgeous runes. The bow of the ship was the head of a phoenix, while the body of the ship was imprinted with all kinds of bird runes. Qin Mu examined the ship in detail, and he was shocked. The head of the ship was a real phoenix head, and it has blood and flesh. The wings and feathers were also real phoenix feathers. Moreover, the ship's body was imprinted with all kinds of bird runes that were actually skins of divine beasts and divine birds. On the skins were natural runes of the divine beasts and divine birds. In that case, these 6 wings. His heart was filled with wonder and shock when he realized that the 6 wings on this ship were wings of gods, and they were definitely not from ordinary gods. Crimson Light Era had used the bodies of gods to forge divine weapons. From this point, one could see the style of this era from its history. Barbaric, wild, and violent. Not only this ship, but even God Execution Mysterious Knife could also show the vicious style of this era. God Execution Mysterious Knife was made from the head of an overlord on Emperor's throne. This trip to Crimson Light Floating World would definitely not be an easy journey. This video will end here.